Hello, everyone. I hope you had a nice lunch and that you're ready for the two sessions of this afternoon. The first one dedicated to citizens engagement and the second one to research and the role of academia in a circular and transition toward for cities. The first session will be moderated by Daniela Patti, who's co-founder and managing director of Eutropian. Daniela, I will leave the word to you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session. So we are very excited of being together and discussing about citizens' role in the transition towards circular economy. And I think in this historical moment, more than ever, it's very important for us to really think about how do we want to transition? How do we want to make sure that people are really on board and make the most of this change and really embrace it. So I'm very happy to be together with my my co-hosts to this session today together, which is Johannes Wild from iFixit. Hi, Johannes.
Hi there.
Hi. So we'll get Johannes to talk to us more about his work, and but it's very interesting to have him with us. iFixit is a global community of people working together in repairing things. So let's fix the world together, I believe, is one of the slogans. So we're looking forward to knowing also a bit more about how do we make sure that we work together towards this. We're very happy to have with us Lara Monticelli. Hi, Lara.
Hey.
Hi. So Lara is a sociologist, exactly, from the Copenhagen Business School, and will be talking to us very much. I mean, your perspective is very much about sociology in relation also to the role of young precarious workers. I know you've done a lot of research over the years about this, so we're very interested in knowing also the role of circular economy also in terms of economic and social impact. And finally, we have with us Marco Kessler from the Sustainable Branding Index. Hi, Marco.
Hi there.
Hi. Which is very interesting, as then the Sustainable Brand Index is one of the largest brand studies on sustainability. So we're very happy to be with speakers and co-hosts together with me in this discussion that are coming from very diverse backgrounds, as you see. And what we want to discuss in this session together today is really what is the role of citizens about this? Who are the citizens? This very vague, word that is used for everybody. Could it mean anybody to some extent, and maybe nobody really? Because if we have to sometimes maybe be a bit more specific about who these citizens are when we're trying to address citizen engagement in circular economy, to really allow for a cultural and economic and social shift towards a more circular functioning of our economy. And this is why it's extremely interesting in the framework of the Reflow project to be really able to look into what has been the role of citizens in the different pilots that have been carried out in the project. But this is a moment of a broader reflection that we would like to take together with us. So I would like to start with the very first round of impressions for our speakers about, when we're talking about the role of citizens, what can their role really be in terms of impacting the transition, and especially, who are these citizens we're addressing, and what type of transition are we addressing? In terms of pros and cons about what goes with this. And maybe I would start, open mic freely with who would like to start with this very first impression. Marco, would you like to maybe start with your perspective on this?
Certainly. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to join this discussion. So, to kick it off, I would say that citizens play an very important role as a stakeholder in the overall transformation of societies towards more sustainable societies, because they have an active or can be an active voice in the change that is really needed. Like we can see it, for example, with Greta Thunberg's movement and Fridays for Future, which since 2019 had like an enormous impact on both like the political direction, but also like created a lot of momentum around the need to really act on climate change and sustainability in general. So, and we need kind of the voices of citizens to really come together and be like kind of a player that constantly reminds us kind of we need to get better, so to say. So this is more like in an overarching level corresponding to your question about the importance, and I guess we'll dig deeper into that. But I don't know, maybe I'll leave the stage for someone else. I can also say that we, for example, at SB Insight, we are doing a lot of market research around sustainability and consumer research, and citizens, we're also at the same time consumers. So we do certainly have an impact also as consumers in changing our behavior and pushing, kind of making more sustainable choices, and pushing also companies on the one hand through like activism, but also on our daily actions as consumers to make an impact and to come up. And we have also detected several behavior groups, but we can maybe come to that later. I would like to also give the others a chance to comment on that initially.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Marco. Yeah.
Well, actually, I would like to.
Lara, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so maybe I should just mention that, of course, my work on precarious workers was dated 10 years ago, and more recently, I am actually interested in alternative forms of organizations and collective communities like eco-villages, for example, that strive to prefigure alternative, more sustainable and just futures. And I guess that's why I've been invited by the Project Reflow team here today. So the role of citizens, yeah, I agree with Marco, is very important because, so we remember at the end of the 90s, right, the very famous book, No Logo by Naomi Klein, it was kind of stressing the importance of voting with your purse, right? Voting with your consumption preferences. Of course, that's fundamental, as Marco has said, because political consumerism, as it's called, can really have a lot of direct and indirect effects, right? We talk about boycotting certain products for political reasons, economic reasons, or also boycotting, so choosing to buy a certain product and not another product for certain reasons. These kind of behaviors certainly matter and have also indirect effect of raising awareness, of fostering public debates around certain issues. Let's think about all the campaigns against, for instance, Nike or Nestlé. They really had an impact on the strategies and on the supply chains of these companies. On the other side, though, the sociologist in me is also kind of a bit critical on posing too much importance on the citizen consumer, because we always need to remember that when we shift participation from the political arena, right, democracy, to the market, the market is also the place where inequalities are the most, right, starking. And so we need to be careful because, of course, if we think about an ethical, a fair product, usually we know the price is usually higher than an unethical, unsustainable product, because it kind of, behind this price, we have the cost of having more fair supply chains, more fair wages, etc., etc. So we need also to compensate that. How do we make sure that citizens are given equal opportunities in choosing which products to purchase, right? We're talking now about a moment of extreme inflations. Prices are raising because of the grand geopolitical situation, of course. So how do we make sure that the citizen doesn't become only a consumer, but only retains his identity as a citizen, which is an active participant in our democracies? And sorry, this is just an introduction, but I will be happy to talk about.
We'll explore more. Absolutely. Thank you, Lara, for raising this. But before commenting also myself about this, Johannes, I would like to also have your impression, given your different background. That I think that would be very enriching to what Marco and Lara already put on the table.
Thank you for having me. I agree completely with what you guys just have been saying. It's for me, it really comes down to the responsibility. I think that's the main topic. That's the overarching thing. And for me, responsibility is rooted. It's politics, it's economy, and it's the citizen. And I think we all are responsible for that change that needs to be achieved. And we as a Fix-It, we really try to make sustainable living easier for people, for citizens. So we try to empower consumers or citizens to make a difference. This is our goal. This is where we engage to keep products in the loop and help people to do that themselves. So this is really empowering them. This is our goal.
Thanks, Johannes. I think it's very interesting that the first element that rises from the discussion about, what is the role of citizens in circular economy, the first issue that comes up is the role of citizens as consumer. And obviously this goes with some problematics, obviously. And I think just following up to what also Lara was highlighting, to which I totally agree, because citizens are definitely consumers, but not only, and we have to be able also, as we said, we can look at different groups of citizens and look at also their different economic power in relation to the circular economy, and what is their role in the chain, in the work chain that is related to all of this. The question would also be to you at this point, and what is the role of the governments when we're looking at citizens as members of a democratic political system, which is the system in which we are hopefully operating? What is the role that governments can instead have in order to collaborate with citizens in this transition? So I'd be curious to have a bit of a round, and this time maybe I would start with Lara to maybe give us a bit of an impact, just following up on what you were saying before.
Great point, Daniela, thanks. Definitely, I think that governments, and here intended, of course, at various levels, so local, regional, national, supranational, they have a very important role. Of course, the first one that comes to my mind is the role of enhancing and fostering certain regulations, because it's thanks to regulations that supply chains become more sustainable, that certain processes are allowed to become easier. And for instance, even when we think about what citizens are allowed or not allowed to do, regulation is very important. For instance, in Italy, very recently, there's been some new regulation that recognize eco-communities and eco-villages as legal entities. And thanks to this new legislation, which of course is at the very initial stage, so it will be improved, it will be revised, but these kind of communities now have the legal status to, for instance, purchase some parts of land, to rent certain land, usually is rural communities, and to establish themselves as regenerative actors in the society. So definitely a regulatory role, but also I think that there are some kind of, we think about a triangle. So we have the corporations, the firm, the governments, and then of course the citizens. So the governments really have this very important role in kind of balancing and regulating the access to certain products to their citizens, which products are allowed to be in the market or not, but also what companies and firms have to respect certain rules and regulations. I'm thinking another example, for instance, is the banning of plastic bags in supermarkets. This has come from years and years of also citizens mobilization, citizens associations and organizations pushing for reducing plastic use in supermarkets and in big chains. But it was thanks to the regulation that then this was possible. And so then you have basically a change. So in the sense, I think that bottom up and top down change, they really should go hand in hand, and we should really avoid simplifications and to say one is bad, one is good, or one is more efficient than the other. Actually, they really mutually influence each other, and they're both equally important.
Thank you. Thanks, Lara. Johannes? Oh, go, Marco. Absolutely, go ahead.
Sorry, Johannes, you can also go if you want. No more. Okay. Yeah, like I just had a short comment as well on what, touching upon what Lara said. I think she made very like interesting, relevant points here. Obviously, regulations is a very important puzzle, like part of a puzzle in the overall picture. I would also like to add another point that I see as very relevant, that kind of touches upon the nexus a little bit of citizen and governments and about the relationship, and which is, and that applies to level essentially on like governments on all levels. So from the local to the national and perhaps even global formats. But I would like the term deliberate democracy is something like, so what that means is like that the government really facilitates forums for ordinary citizens to actually contribute to like the political debates that are taking place. We've seen some initiatives in France recently, some years ago, around also like forming climate policies. And I think this is a very important tool governments have, like to bring kind of the democracy to the people again, and offering them a forum actually to contribute their own ideas and views on things. And it also plays an important role in kind of legitimizing like policy and political decisions, obviously, and is a great like source for inspiration from the electorate at that point. And I think another point that's very relevant that it can help overcome is that kind of like those kind of debates about sustainability and like regulation, environmental regulation kind of permeates into like a kind of a bigger part of the population. Because I think one of the issues is that we're very much in a sustainability bubble. Like people who are talking about this, we're sometimes not even aware of it. Like we're like usually talking to like-minded people, to people all like sharing similar values. But essentially, and that's also what we're seeing in the market research we're doing, is that this is only a very small part of the overall of the population of countries. So like I've been recently reminded of that by looking at some of the data we gathered, that knowledge, for example, of certain terms that are hanging around, like climate neutrality, climate being climate positive, those kind of things, circular economy for that sense. It's like between 20 to 40% of the population who have some kind of knowledge about what that means. And that doesn't mean they understand everything of it. So it's also a very complex debate, and many people don't really have the maybe interest or energy and time to commit to that. So it's that kind of forum of deliberate democracy is a great place to engage people from all kinds of societal levels and really enabling them to contribute and forming policies, like extending that out of the bubble that we're usually discussing.
Absolutely.
I think it's really crucial what you just mentioned, and very well formulated. Thank you for pointing that out. And I agree. We're all, sometimes we are really preaching to the choir and not talking to the people, the broader audience. And this is maybe also why we take this opportunity today to take these opportunities to discuss in a broader group also. And for me, it's really important to onboard citizens, to involve them in the process. I think politics often makes the mistake, making decisions and not engaging people, not including them, and this is important because we to make that change, to make the transition, we all need to do our part. And I think the question that you the initial question is really complex. What is the role of politics? Or I mean, it's protection, it's information. There's so much, and in the end, I think it comes down to helps citizens making more sustainable choices. That's what I see in that context as the primary task. This is a difficult one. This is a tough one, and I'm convinced it's not only politics that can solve it alone. It's really it needs all of us.
Thanks, Johannes, and thank you all, because I think what is interesting about this is when we're talking about this, yes, definitely there is an aspect of circular economy, obviously, that entails consume, and therefore our role as consumers. There is a role of us as electing governments and political figures that are able to guide us through the process. But there is also a very interesting level of self-organization, and this is something that is a bottom line of what you all said. And I think this, I'd like to get a bit more insights also from your side in relation to, what is the social dimension about this citizen involvement and citizen activism in circular economy? Marco mentioned Fridays for Future. We've been mentioning about the Citizens Assembly in France, which worked so and so. But there is definitely a very strong, in certain environments, there is a very strong, and especially the new generation, not only, but largely, I think this is interesting to see also a very strong political activism from the younger generations in relation to environmental issues, because it's not only an issue of economy, it's an issue of environment, but it's also an issue of social justice. And I think what is interesting, and I'd like to get your input, and I would like to start from Johannes this time to have a bit of an idea from also the perspective of the work that is being carried out in iFixit, is what is also the social impacts, and what is the role of citizen engagement in circular economy when we're looking also about citizen empowerment and looking into how do the work of self-organization that we see, which can be at a large scale or it can be also on a smaller scale. So I would like a little bit of a few impressions from your perspective.
What we observe is that I guess the awareness changed throughout the last maybe 5 years. There's momentum, and that's really also I think it's also broadening. I mean, speaking for iFixit, iFixit is the biggest open source online repair manual, and we have more than 80,000 repair manual step-by-step guides, and we don't create those. I mean, we do parts of them, but it's really a huge community that shares our vision and that contributes to that. So it's not that we do that on our own. I mean, we create the framework, we create the space, but it's also a social movement, and I think that's something which we see quite often in different fields and different contexts. And maybe linking it to the previous question, what we also observe is that the lever that politics and citizens have already touches on manufacturers, for example. So we see a bigger interest in companies to making the change. So looking at repairability is an issue now. Manufacturers come to us and ask for help in terms of design for repairability, design for sustainability, and we try to consult them in a way and help them making more sustainable products that are more durable, repairable, energy efficient, and free of hazardous chemicals. This is important, and I think this is so many things going on, and there's so much change right now, and it's important to keep that momentum and ride that wave, because it helps us.
Thanks, Johannes. I think that's extremely interesting, because it's really starting also with looking into how also individuals really, and individual citizens enter in the circular economy with a direct interest of of repairing, which can be for saving up money. It can be also because they politically believe in the role of of adjusting and fixing things. But you know, there's a lot of dimensions of social and economic dimensions to that.
Yeah.
And this brings me a little bit to Lara also. You mentioned this was a part of these research. You've been different aspects of this. You've been researching over the years in terms of local communities working on sustainable in eco villages and so on. But also, we referred also to your researches back years ago into the role of labor and especially of more fragile groups. So I'd like to understand also from you, what is your take about this? When we're talking about citizen engagement and circular economy, what is actually the take in terms of the social and labor impacts and quality of life?
Thanks, Daniela. I would like to maybe first take a step back and go back to what we were saying before about the social movement aspect. So in a way, also what iFixit is doing is kind of collectivizing an individual action, which is like fixing objects, fixing products, and they're making it somehow a collective endeavor, right? And there's also a shared creation, like Johannes just said, of knowledge. And, you know, also from my research, what I realized in the last 10 years, we could take maybe as a pivotal moment, as a conjunctural moment, the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. I think that historical moment kind of fostered something. And I think it gave rise to maybe a new typology of social movements. When we think about social movements, traditionally, we think about groups of people, large masses going on the streets and protesting or claiming against something. It's like in the last 10 years, of course, I'm not saying that they were not existing before, but we've definitely seen a surge into this new type of social movement of collective, which focuses much more on the doing, on bringing the change in the here and now. And I like to call them prefigurative social movements because they're highly experimental. Sometimes they're short-lived. Sometimes these initiatives, they are really, instead, they really survive over time. They manage to become like long-term experiments, long-term initiatives. But what they have in common is that they're highly experimental. They try to embody the change they want to see in the larger society. Even if they're very niche, even if they're very small, they can really become seeds of change. And also in my research, I'm seeing that in eco-villages, these communities are experimenting with bioarchitecture, with new technologies, but also in terms of what are the values, there's also an experimentation. What does it mean to live together? What does it mean to thrive in a community? Or what does it even mean to live collectively? So there's really like an experimentation that is going on multiple levels: economic, social, cultural, even we could even dare to say on a more kind of value levels, even spiritual level, we could say. So yeah, there is this kind of shift, and I think there are these new social movements. And when it comes to the work labor aspect, just one very short comment is that we need to keep in mind that a big focus is now on the fact that the transition, the green transition, needs to be just, not only green, right, but also a just transition, meaning that all the workers that are involved, they also need to be paid fair wage. They need to be put in conditions that are also sustainable. So when we talk about sustainability, we talk about sustainability on multiple levels. Other critics, like in sociology, for instance, or other social theorists, they provocatively ask, we need also to keep in mind for all the people who are working in this bubble, like Marco was saying, of sustainability of what exactly? Because sometimes the feeling of some is that, are we trying just to kind of greenwash contemporary capitalism, or our quest should be instead a quest for really a shift of paradigms, a shift towards a different socioeconomic system that is not so prone to crises? as capitalism. And maybe I'm being a bit provocative here, but I think we should talk about really what is the change that we are seeking here.
Thanks, Lara. Marco, would you like to, adding on to what Johannes and Lara were saying, would you like to add?
Yes, yes, I would like to add some words. And like it's both Johannes and also Lara made very good points. Like I think like I have comments to both. Maybe I just start with Lara because that was the most recent, and then just a short to what Johannes was saying. So like this last part, I would like to also stress even like further of what Lara was saying is this kind of just transition. And like I couldn't agree more that we can't only focus on the green, but it also needs to be just, because we've several times before in the debate also been talking about we need to enable citizens to make sustainable choices. And that's certainly important. It's about like choosing other, like whether it's products, services, or whatever, but like choosing the more sustainable one is usually also more pricey, more expensive. And there's also the social dimension of again that many citizens maybe can't even afford to make sustainable choices, even though their heart wants to do it. So I really think that we in general in debate need to even get better in thinking those two things together and not like playing that out against each other, like jobs versus the environment, but rather like, you know, integrating this debate and designing models where we achieve both. Because what is clear as well is that in the green transition, there will be losers. It's not only win-win the whole time. There will be people who will be losing money. There will be people, and how do we, for example, in Germany, that's a big debate about like ending, like phasing out coal. There's a lot of regions who are highly dependent on that. Like, how do we remunerate them in a financial way that they don't oppose it, but like come on board, like reschoolings, for example, etc. I'm thinking of here. So this aspect of just, I think, needs to be addressed even more, because I think besides the education and everything and the heightened awareness of Johannes was mentioning, it also comes down to the actual financial capabilities of an individual and like, yeah, so this is very important to my mind to think that together. And just a short comment also to what Johannes was saying about the raised awareness levels. And I just want to add to that's exactly also what we are seeing in the consumer and market research we're doing. Like if we're looking in the markets, I talked earlier about the behavior groups. We have 4 of them, which are ego, moderate, smart, and dedicated. And obviously they're not aiming to, you know, like you could further go into them and there will be nuances in the groups. The groups themselves are heterogeneous, but all of those 4 groups have kind of like featured or identify themselves through certain behavior patterns. And what we see is that while ego, for example, is not so much caring about sustainability, and moderate is like actually also the biggest part of society, around 40%, which is like coming along when it's trendy, when sustainability becomes a norm, but maybe not actively pushing, is that those 2 groups are shrinking over time. We really see that there's like a whole movement from ego and moderate. So you could say our society is becoming less ego and moderate and more smart and dedicated. And to that part, smart is just someone who's interested in sustainability and someone who is also sees it as a kind of a lifestyle, but like also has this what's in it for me perspective. While the dedicated is really the ones that we see like activists who are in the forefront of the battle, and like especially those 2 groups are really, really growing in numbers. So that's something very positive to take away from here, that we're also seeing that there is change underway. I mean, the change is slow, but like perhaps it's also a glimmer of hope that I don't know if it's true, but like in some research I read that like usually it takes maybe 10 to 15% of a population to like start a change, a large scale change, and then like people will come on board and the change will happen. And so that's very good, even though it's maybe only 10-14% of dedicated we're having. I think those are a big motor in that debate, can be.
Thanks. I must say that one of the things, and I really appreciate that from starting looking into citizens as consumers, we're now looking into also what is the topic of just transition, because I think this is one of the most pressing issues that we have politically at this stage, is really looking into how circular economy becomes an opportunity for creative, inclusive jobs, improving the possibility for accessing to the market. Also, people who might not have a high level of formal education, in order to think about new ways and new sectors also for which to get on board people in new ways, in a more environmentally but also economically and socially sustainable manner. And I think this is, I would start again with Johannes to have a bit of an impression, because with the last question, and obviously you can add any additional comments if you like. Meanwhile, the last round, I think, is, what we're seeing is that largely this awareness, and this is something that you've been all somehow mentioning, is the bubble. There are certain environments who are politically more aware about the role of and more have constructive criticism also towards what is the role of this sustainability discourse, and are thinking about circular economy in a way that has social, cultural impacts that are inclusive towards a larger community. But still we see that, just as Marco was saying, what is the percentage of people that we need to have for real change? We definitely need to increase the basis of people that are active towards this. And obviously there will always be a diversity of perspectives, but probably we need to be able to move in a larger way in the same direction. So what I would like to ask Johannes is, from the perspective of iFixit, you started mentioning also how you've seen over the last couple of years changing also the type of people and the awareness in which they've been reaching out to iFix. What do you see, what do you think are the next steps based on your experience up to now? What are the next steps to really reach out to a larger citizenship in heading towards this change?
Actually, that's one question that is very much in my mind. And I wonder how we can interrupt, or maybe even disrupt, the wasteful and linear patterns of production and consumption. How can we make needing less and using or having your stuff longer, make it the new cool? This is for me how we could reach a broader group, showing your phone and telling, okay, that's 10 years old and still like on the first day, and I repaired it twice, I replaced the battery. Look at that, this is cool. And not having the current model. I mean, that's boring. You don't have any history with that. You don't have any binding with that device. It's just a new device like you can buy in the store. So how can we, make that shift in people's minds, making it the new cool? This is really what is on my mind, and what I saw in a small initiative, creating stickers that you can put on your devices saying, okay, this is 10 years old, or this is having this bought in 2000, or I don't know, showing also that you're proud, and I think that could make it more attractive for others to follow and reach a broader audience. And also, I think it's also about the narrative. If telling those stories of successful repairs, for example, this is something, when we do workshops with people, usually it ends with a smile, because people are proud, they're happy that they could achieve it successfully. They have repaired their device. It has a new battery. It's cool. It will work. It will last for another 2 years. And this makes them smile. And this is also a experience that children should make, not having that monolithic block of a device that is unrepairable and just cool. No, it's not cool. It's cool if you can replace it, if you really own it and have it for a long time. And this is where I also look for, people, with a similar mindset, making that to interrupt that thinking pattern.
Thanks, Johannes. Yeah, I absolutely also can recognize the fact of also having this empathy towards this, and satisfaction of being part of this process is fundamental. We must definitely also not underestimate this. Marco, I would like to ask also your impression. How can we reach a broader citizenship that is engaging and active towards this change in, you know, in the way we've been talking about the just transition as we've been defining it?
Yeah, I think like there's several points, like several strategies that like come to mind. I mean, like obviously, like also what Johannes was telling, this making repairing stuff like cool. This is like a normative mind shift that's kind of required. Like, and that is something obviously that also like comes over time, that can be triggered by such really cool initiatives like iFixit. And like where interest is sparked and where like stories of success are told, because I think that's important. We have so much negativity in our feeds and everything, and like so much now another alarm report from Science, and we only have like, I don't know, like 5 years left or something. And while this is obviously important, it is also wearing down the average consumer. This is also an effect we're seeing, like though especially those who are maybe not so aware of those issues, they're like kind of getting into this feeling of helplessness, of like it's already too late. And this is exactly what we should avoid. We should really tell the stories of success, lift initiatives that are like on the forefront of actually doing things now. So I think this is really important. And then obviously, I think also to really educating people, like not perhaps nudging people. I mean, there's a lot of research on like making like the sustainable option in some ways, you know, like the default option. Like I can see that here in Stockholm where I'm living, that like people have like defaulted the option of like a sustainable energy supply if you move in a new home. I mean, that's excellent for people who don't actually care about, you know, like those things themselves. Like this will help, and that's not undebated nudging, I know, but like there's, I think, several strategies that need to come together here. The like education, it starts in school, like sensitizing kind of people for that this is important. And we're talking about a just transition, actually making it possible for people to live sustainably out of a financial perspective. So I think these are like the 4 pillars that I would stress, like, and the last one with enabling people through like financially is certainly a huge challenge, because in the end you can be as well educated about it, you want to do it, if you don't have the economic means, you can't do it. So yeah, it's those four pillars, I would say.
Thanks, Marco. I would ask a last impression on this also to Lara, and then we have a question from the audience that we'll get to. Go, Lara.
Yeah, thanks, Daniela. I agree with Marco that, but maybe also, I don't know, maybe in reality, I kind of disagree, in the sense that for me, responsibilizing only the citizen and the consumer is not the only and best strategy, because I mean, corporations are still pursuing, the big corporations that rule our contemporary economies are still pushing strategies of growth, accumulation, profitability, and those are pursued sometimes, of course, by not really paying enough attention how the sustainability, and here I talk about the economic and financial and social, also sustainability of their supply chains. So I think there is also a need to change that. And of course, citizens, they have a great role. They can pressure the corporate world. They can raise awareness. There can be campaigns. NGO organizations are fundamental. Of course, activists are fundamental. But we need really to, we can't put the burden of this change, of this transition, only on the shoulders of the citizens. That unfortunately is not going to cut it. We need to also look at who are the subjects that are driving our contemporary economies, right? And these are the corporations that actually produce the goods and the services that we are buying as consumers. There is a shift. Indeed, I'm not sure if it's greenwashing or not, but recently, even the Financial Times had a new column titled Reset Capitalism, calling for rethinking the need for rethink capitalism. If we look at the economic forum at Davos, one of the chairs said that, of course, we need to reimagine capitalism, we need to rethinking. But so I'm just saying that to me, it's very important that we take a step back and we also look at the big picture, and we look at, okay, we've been living with this system for the last couple of 100 years, and capitalism has changed. Of course, it went through different phases and stages and crises, but it still works by abiding to certain fundamental rules. And so is it time to maybe question them, of course, and take this criticism seriously? And some people claim that they're already doing that, but I think we should also be critical of that. We should really look at where is it this only like greenwashing, kind of a surface strategy, or are we really switching to a new system, right? So maybe this is kind of more a macro reflection, but to me, it is also fundamental, because contemporary capitalism works because there are conditions of possibility, there are highly exploitative. Without those, capitalism wouldn't be able to reproduce and continue over time. And in fact, maybe this push towards sustainability, to this green shift, and the fact that big corporations themselves, they're really embracing this, comes from the fact that if natural resources in 10, 15, 20 years won't be available anymore, well, these companies will have to find new models of production in order to survive and still be profitable. So again, just to kind of put the big picture in perspective here.
And somehow connected to what Lara was the criticality that Lara was raising is also one of the questions from the audience. Now, we're actually stealing a few minutes from the break time, because I think it's interesting also what comments arrive from the audience, but I would ask you all to have very brief input, so that we allow everybody also to grab a glass of water before the next session. And the question is related to this. So the question is, it is true that repairing is definitely a sustainable living mode, and obviously something that we should look towards. But the question from the audience is, how would this go together for need for economic growth? How can we make the government buy into this more than they do now? I think probably that I'd be curious. And meanwhile, we also got an okay. And so I would like to ask you a very quick round also to sum up also your impressions in relation to that. And this time I would from quick closing remark. We don't hear you? Yeah.
Me? Yeah, the connection was lost a second. Sorry. Okay, yeah, I would, in regards to the question, I would definitely also, I mean, there's like, you can first of all obviously question, do we really need growth? I think that's a question you should wonder about, and that's the problem with that, is that like the way we have designed like capitalism itself, the way we have designed our economy, like and like we're kind of locked into like kind of certain past dependencies of the past. We like have a financial model that is built on like taking out loans, which are causing interest rates, which are causing a need to grow to pay back the loans plus the interest rate. So the whole model is kind of forcing us to grow. And like, while it is very like nice to think of like those of changing those ways, I'm not sure to what extent it will be possible in the short term. So like, because this is like a global economic problem, if you see it as a problem. What I want to add to that is also obviously there's different interests at stake here. There's like the interest of companies who want to maximize their profit, who don't have many who that's their major like purpose. And so how do you kind of convince them that like producing more durable products, which will probably cost them money. So obviously, that's why I also thought it was interesting and very relevant what Johannes said. I think in that point, there needs to be consumers who demand products that kind of make companies, yeah, we don't buy any more of your products that go like broken after 2 years, because we don't think it's sexy, so to say. It's not cool anymore. The only issue with that I can see is like functionality, because people always want increased functionality, technological approach. So there would need to be kind of things in place that even like older projects will, for example, get the latest software updates and all of those kind of things. But that's, yeah, I know I've been talking a little bit long, sorry.
No. It's super interesting, and it's nice to see how all engaged we are, but it's in order to everybody also to have the time. Very quick closing words from Johannes and Lara before we say goodbye and thank you to everybody. Johannes, would you like to say a few?
Yeah, this in the context of this economic question, I always, tend to answer, why do most of the countries still raise taxes on labor and not on pollution or emissions or consumption? I mean, this would make a big change, I think, and this is something we should really think about. And the other thing is really, I agree, we cannot push everything to the consumer or to the citizen. It's really also the role of politics. So while we are talking, the Sustainable Product Initiative is launched, and I think this is also something that shows how politics starts more and more to interfere and to incentivize producers to make more sustainable products, and also to push the worst performing product out of the market. I mean, this is really also the role of politics, and I want to stress that this is also highly important. Thank you.
Lara.
Yes, I would agree with Johannes that, of course, we need to stress the role of politics in all this, in kind of pushing, right, companies and the private sector to move in a certain direction. At the same time, I agree also with Marco that, of course, we need to find kind of a short-term kind of solution to deal with this, and of course, part dependency matters. But at the same time, I was wondering, economic growth, right? This is also a big paradigm. Why we could question that. And also when we talk about we, usually in politics, in government, but even like in big supranational institutions, there is this kind of we, a very shared sense that we're all kind of in the same position and situation, which is the same narrative of the Anthropocene, for which kind of the current climate change and the climate crisis is almost caused equally by all the anthropos, all the kind of humankind on the planet, but that's unfortunately not true. There are some parts of the planet, some countries, some parts of this world that are more responsible for this change than others actually, but the consequences of the climate change are unfortunately sometimes paid by those who haven't been responsible for this climate change. Let's think about some islands in the Pacific are disappearing because of the sea levels are rising. So when we talk about we, I think that we always have to keep in mind a kind of a world ecology approach, and the fact that we, who are the we that we're really talking about? There are for sure parts of the world in which growth is definitely needed to make millions of people step out of poverty. But maybe when we talk about the average American or the average Danish citizen, who, by the way, have the highest individual ecological footprint in the world, do we really need growth? Does thinking about growth still make sense? So at the same time, I don't want to embrace your pro-growth or anti-growth or degrowth vision in total, but I think we have to have a nuanced understanding of these kind of processes, right?
Thanks, Lara. So first of all, a very big thank you. We've reached the end of our session. There would be so much more space for additional comments and discussion because there's a lot of our speakers raised a lot of interesting questions, but I hope this will be also, food for thought for for the next sessions, as well as, you know, for our work and ambitions in the upcoming future. So you can all reach out to our speakers also separately. You know, you can find all their contacts. And I would like to say thank you very, very much to Johannes, to Marco, and for Lara for joining this discussion and reflecting together about what is the future of the circular economy, what we want in this in terms of societal change, and how can we really embrace citizenship engagement towards the change that we really want, towards a more just and inclusive. So thank you very much to all, and I would like to give the word back to Christiana. So thank you very much, and goodbye to everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Daniela.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Lara, Marco, Johannes, for this session. It was really interesting. And I think even though that actually ate up a lot of our break time, unfortunately, but I think there were a lot of relevant discussion, like the one of social movements that are highly experimental, and they're actually at the heart of also of the Reflow project, where our Fab Labs and their entrepreneurial spirit and their experimentation actually are at the heart of what we produced. But it's also interesting to think about, are we talking in a bubble? Are we actually talking among people that are like-minded and interested in circular economy? And this is also a good starting point for the session that we're going to have later, which is the research session, where we are going to discuss the role of academia in the transition to a circular economy, and how it will actually, how different actors can engage in a constructive dialogue around this. But I will see you at 2. Thank you.